we're going to be going over how to add exact forms plus batch processing to this new application we have here. So if you remember from last week, we did have the individual auto generation of the batch processor, and we had that complete a couple times, and that went very well. So today we're going to show you guys how to do it for a whole report or a whole query. So we have our customers table here. We already have the document template that we want to use created. We did that from last week, but we have this report here, all active customers. And let's just say I wanted to generate that same welcome letter for all my active customers. Instead of having to click or check a checkbox for each one of these individual records, we could do this based off of a Quickbase query, which is basically saying that a certain condition is true, like customer status is equal to active customer. Or we could do it based off of a report, which you have filtered down already to the specified records that you want to generate. So let's go ahead and without further ado, get exact forms plus batch installed into this application first. So I'm already logged into the Juice Cloud here. Uh, as you may see, we have all of these add-ons active. In your use case, you'll only have your active add-ons in blue. The rest are probably going to be in gray. But if you're interested in learning more about any of these other add-ons, please feel free to reach out or talk to us about the Juice license, as you could have all of these add-ons subscribed to at once rather than just cherry picking a few. But I'm going to go into Exact Forms Plus. And since this application was authorized last week on that previous office hours session, we're going to essentially just install again to a new table just to get that bulk document generation piece involved here. So you see we have 77 applications. That's why it took as long as it did to load all those. But we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and we're going to find our simple contact manager office hours app here. And I'm going to hit set up another table. And by doing this, our setup wizard comes up and it skips the step where we're talking about authorization, and we're just going straight into the setup type. Now, the setup type in this situation is going to be bulk document generation. And remember, that's because we want to generate for a whole report or a whole query of records. We do get this question kind of often. When we say whole report, we're not generating one document for all of those records. We're generating one individual document for each record. So if there's 15 records, you're going to be generating 15 documents. That's 15 transactions with Exact Forms Plus. Can we merge them together? Yes, we absolutely can, but that's not the primary goal in this use case right now. We just want to generate one document per record without having to click it a million times or 15 times in this example. So we're going to now select the table that we want, and we know it's the customers table. And then we're going to use an existing template. And I'm doing this because I don't want to make another standard template on the document templates table. I feel like that'd be a kind of a waste of space and a waste of making records. So let's just go to that document templates table and let's see that we're seeing that welcome contact is our new document. And that's record ID 3. So that's document template 3. So we're just going to pop that right in there, document template 3. And then the filtering criteria, like I mentioned before, there's two ways to do this. We could either do it based off of a report, which is going to use MSQID as that parameter, and that parameter can be found on our help site, or MSQRY, which is going to be using query. So that's going to be the only difference between these two. So we'll do the first one as a report. And the wizard's actually smart enough now where it can ask you, okay, what report do you want to generate this for? So it's going to find all the available reports from the customers table, as you can see here above, and it's going to allow me to choose from those. So I know I want to do all active customers. So I'm going to choose that as my report. So it's going to pre-fill that. And then it also gives me the option here to merge output files. So as I mentioned, you can take all now 15 of those records and merge them into one output document, but you don't have to. It's still going to generate one individual file per record for each one of these. I'm going to check it just so we have that field created because we may want to show you guys that after. And then lastly, in the advanced settings, you'll also see that there's the ability to select the cloud storage option. Now, for those of you who have Amazon S3 or Dropbox, you may want to have these documents saved to those document repositories automatically, but that is not required. That is just some advanced settings if you would like. If I were to click either one of these, you'll notice that there's an additional step that gets added here on the left That's for you to add your Amazon S3 information. I'm not going to do that today, but I just wanted to show you guys that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finish. And you're going to get what actually two new tables, one new table, two new tables, and a couple new fields. So let's see. We're going to have all of those listed out by the wizard here. So as mentioned in the previous office hours, you get your congratulations message, which is actually pretty important. Don't just close this out right away unless you're very confident in what you have to be doing. But this is telling you, hey, here's some documentation that you could be using. You could always click this to go straight to the documentation. It also tells you that the setup is not completely finished, but because of Quickbase's API limitations with making email notifications at this time, we're not able to make this email notification for you automatically. You have to do it by hand. So we give you a link to the email notification steps, which you can use to then essentially execute this bulk generation to fire off. And I'm going to show you guys how to make that in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open that in a new tab just so we have that ready to go. You'll also see what was added to the application. So we have the ability to view the customers table, where we can view the two new fields that were added, EFP document 2 and EFP date 2. The reason why there's a 2 appending these fields is because we already had those two fields created for the previous setup. And then we have the 2 or 3 actually creating new tables, batch processing logs, and batch processing errors. So let's go back into our app and check all that out. So when I hit refresh, you're going to see those new tables appear. And we can go right into that first batch processing table and see what we have ready to go. So we have no records here. And this is just about where most of our clients get tripped up and they kind of stop. So I want to make a note that at 2:11, this is an important portion of the bulk generation piece. When you have these new tables created, you want to make a new batch processing record. And what you'll see is there's actually the batch processing arguments field already created there. That's really your button, essentially. Those are the parameters that are behind the button that we're going to pass through our processor to execute this batch. And that's extremely important. And again, I'm going to preface this for those of you who were here last week. We went into the EFP batch processing arguments for single document generation very heavily. We're not going to do it as heavily today, but we definitely want to focus on this field and why it's important and how it's controlling this entire process. But to make a new record, we're going to simply call this the new, a new name. So maybe I want to call it all active customers because I know that's the report that we're generating for. And that's really it. That's all you need to do when it comes to saving this, because you just want to have a new record there to execute off of. So let's just open this back up. When we're going to hit execute batch, essentially what this is doing is this is just hitting your own local URL to then edit the record to say that the execution has been requested. And we're going to use that in the trigger field. And I know this may seem intimidating, but you don't need to really make any changes here, except for potentially adding an app token. And we may need to do that ourselves. So we're going to check that in a moment. But all this is going to do is put into the trigger field the word batch execution requested. So let's go ahead and take a look. So again, this is that trigger field, field 7. And that's field 7 here. See field 7. Now, for those of you who are not experts in formula building, I know personally I'm not a huge expert here. You don't have to worry about making really any changes to this. This comes out of the box ready to go for you. I just wanted to show those who may be more interested kind of what's happening here and why you're clicking this button. So the next step here, and I always recommend doing this first because you want to make sure you get it done, is to make that email notification. So I'm going to go into settings, that gear, and I'm going to hit notifications, subscriptions, reminders. And again, this is from the batch processing table, not from your customers table, which is your master table. And you're going to hit new, notification, create. Very important with all of our videos, we try to focus on this. Please make sure you hit open email notification. If you get an error message for this, again, I think I showed this in last week's. If you ever get this error message, please just contact Quickbase's support team and ask them to enable open email notifications for your realm, and that will handle that for you. So we're going to make this open, and we're going to say fire batch, let's call it number 1. Now, the notify whom portion is important. I always put myself in as one of those who get the notification because I want to see that it fired off. And if nothing gets generated, then I know that there was an error in the process. So if I get the notification to my own email address, but nothing happens, then there was something wrong with what was set up. It's not based off of the trigger to fire this out. So I'm going to go back to our create email notification steps here. And I'm actually going to go grab the correct email address. In step 5, you'll see enter the following email address, EFP batch. We're going to copy that and paste that right in there. So now we're contacting yourself and our batch processor. Now, very important, notification when. Now, a lot of mistakes can happen here, and I really, really want to make sure you guys take this home and take this away from you, whether you're watching now or watching in the future. You can get yourself in a loop here. We've had clients make hundreds of thousands of documents by accident. Please do not do that. That would be a big problem, and we hope that nobody gets that happening. So the best way to do that is to make kind of checks and balances for yourself to ensure that it's only going to generate the documents that you're expecting. So instead of having it when any field changes, big no-no, make sure you put it as when any of the following field changes, always important. And in this situation, you're going to choose the trigger field. Now, the trigger field is kind of what's being changed when you hit execute batch. That's the only logical field here to use. So when the trigger field changes and the following conditions are true, so we're going to do, let's see here, the trigger field contains the word requested. It's almost like it knows what I wanted to say. And the reason why we're doing that is because in that button that I showed you before, we're using the words batch execution requested. So if we find the word requested, we know that this is trying to kick off. It should not kick off if it's already been completed. Now in this custom message, you can just say, batch for office hours for me, but maybe for you, it's batch for Acme Corp, whatever your company name is. That would just help us for debugging. If we needed to, we can kind of find these emails a little bit easier if you name it a certain way. Now, the only thing you're going to put into the custom message itself is the batch processing arguments. That is it. That is all you need to include. You don't need to include anything trailing. Just make sure that there's no spaces, there's nothing behind or in front of this, and you'll be all set in terms of the email notification. So we're going to hit save. We have that there. Just to double check it, you can always come back in and look, see who the owner is. Make sure that the owner is either yourself or an admin on your team. Make sure that it's active, where this checkbox is green. And also make sure that if the owner is red, so if you guys have something that was created in the past and you see maybe that user has been removed from the app and that's red, this is no longer going to fire. So just make sure you can change the owner to someone, whether it's yourself or an admin, who would be the appropriate person to kind of own this email notification or own this event type in Quickbase. So that said, I'm going to exit these settings and go back to the batch processing here. So now that we have that email notification set up, we're actually ready to fire. But before we fire this off, I do want to show you guys a few things here. So since we're on the new forms, you guys need to add these reports by hand since we can't add them automatically. So when you hit this report or form editor on the top right, we want to add some additional fields here. And it's actually going to be a report. And we're going to choose the report from the batch processing logs table. We're just going to hit list all. Now, realistically, I kind of want to have that on the right, so I'm going to put that on my right side of the screen. And let's see, I want to take another report, and maybe I want to have the batch processing errors and list all as well. So now I'm going to get 2 reports that are going to basically give me all of the information from these batches if they were to fire off. Yeah, I really wanted that to go a little bit more to the right. See how quickly and easily I could do that. I just want to extend that over just a smidge more. Yeah, take up all that screen space. That's the beauty of new forms, we'll say. All right, cool, looks good. So now that we have those 2 reports, so we can see if anything changes here, you probably want to hide these toolbars at the top. I know you can do that as well pretty easily now. And I know I'm, going all over the place a little bit, but we probably want to have those hidden a little bit. So show toolbar, maybe you want to take that off, just because you don't want to have people adding records there. This should only be added if something were to happen by one of us. And what I mean one of us is the add-on itself should be adding records here, not users. So it's probably best practice to hide that toolbar. So with that said, the last thing I want to talk about from the batch processing is the batch processing arguments. And this is probably the most important part when it comes to the add-on itself, because this is what you're passing in. Now, I will say the new wizard, for those of you who haven't used it yet, is awesome. It is setting everything up to a T to what you need. There's almost zero manual work needed at this point for this field. And I'm very confident that this is going to work out of the box. But I do want to show you guys what's happening here in case you guys are interested or want to make changes in the future. So just to start, we have our client ID. As you guys know, that should be your own unique client ID. Then we're referencing that it's this app, and we're using the document templates table, and TP ID, template ID, is record ID 3. We put that in through the wizard. If you guys were to change a template in the future, you would just change it here. Maybe it's 3 to 4 or 4 to 15, whatever it might be. If you guys wanted that to be dynamic, you of course can make a field to vary that document template as well. You could either make an if statement right in this formula, maybe a case statement, or you can make a separate field that will control that based off of a set of conditions in Quickbase. The next one is we're identifying the master table. So the master table is the customers table. And then we're saying that the file name that we're going to be generating for all these is EFP batch file. So maybe we want to do EFP batch, customers report. Now, I do want to also mention, please, please, please always remember no spaces. If there's any spaces in the file name for batch processing arguments, it will not work. We treat spaces as an identifier for us. So if you see a space there, take it out or change it with an underscore, or else you will get an error. That's a very, very common one. I would say we probably get 2 support tickets plus a week just on that alone. So please remember that if you can. MSQID. Now, I mentioned this when we were doing the wizard. This is essentially saying which report do you want to be using. So QID, the reason why we have that, if I go back to our customers table, and maybe I pull up that all active customers report, you can see in the URL, we have QID equals 7. So that's where we're getting that 7 from. We're doing the all active customers. Now you can see that somewhere else if you're not familiar with going through the URL. If you go into settings, reports and charts, you can also find the report ID here. So all active customers, report ID 7 right here. So that's another way where you could always get that. When we go back into the batch processing arguments, you also see that we're identifying the fields that we're updating as well on the master table. So we're updating the file attachment ID, which is 47, and the EFP DTE, EFP date, which is 48. The document format, docfmt, is PDF. And now we're doing for the exact forms plus batch parameters here. So we're saying, hey, the exact forms plus batch is this table. So we're doing it in this current DB ID, and it's for this record ID. And where are we updating things? So we're doing field 7 is the trigger field. And then if we wanted to, we could also add additional things like add files. Add files is a great parameter for those of you who don't know. If there's another file attachment field on the record that you would like to also have included, or on maybe a related record within Quickbase, you can identify that here. And if you guys ever are interested in that, you can find more information in the exact forms plus formula URL parameters. You'll find add files right here. All right. Keep going down the line. If you had app tokens enabled, you can put an app token here. And then we're identifying the batch processing logs, which we're updating, and the batch processing error logs, which we're also updating. Now, these fields here, the error message fields, these are field IDs from the errors table. So we're updating those. And then these are the merge parameters if we're going to be merging. Now, we did check that checkbox, so we have the merge parameters in here. So we're saying we're merging to this table and on this record, and the merge file attachment field, the field that we're saving to, is going to be field 12. So we're merging to field 12. And again, that's the merge file. It's a file attachment field field 12, and the merge date field 13 as well. And the very last thing here is the merge FN, merge file name. This just says merge file. Maybe I'll just put in merge customer file just so you guys can all see. And the very last thing is type equals EFP batch. Just please always keep that in there. That's just for our processor to know what we're actually executing. So that's pretty much every parameter down the line. And without further ado, since it just took away that page on me, which is fine, let's fire this off. And fingers crossed, it works on the first try. Oh, look at that. So this is a good error for everyone to see. Invalid application token. An application token must be supplied. Good error. That's because we're passing in APIs through the URL. So we want to make sure that we update that. So within this execute batch here, I think I mentioned before, we need an app token. So let's go find. Now, pop quiz for those of you who have taken the Quickbase certification, aka Sarah. We're putting Sarah on the spot here for having a little fun. Sarah, how do I get to app tokens? Sarah, paying attention?
I am paying attention.
Okay.
To app tokens, you're gonna go on the app settings. And app properties. Scroll. Manage application tokens.
Okay. Good job, Sarah. So we're going to create a new application token. Let's say batch app token. And we're going to put OK to copy on. And it's just going to create me a new app token. So we're going to take that and we're going to pop that in to our app token here. And I believe that's the only place where we need it. So let's go ahead and check that out. And it does take us back. Let's see, refresh. And let's pop that in here. Let's see. Okay, so now that we hit that, no error. And you see some things change on the page here. We had some things refresh. So we see batch execution requested in that trigger field. So remember that word requested is going to be what is actually triggering that email notification to go out. That's very important. And then this execute batch no longer becomes clickable because it's in process, but you do see that we have this processing. You might want to have that next to the execute batch. It's interesting how the new forms does not allow you to do that, but processing, refresh your screen until this appears. So we could have these next to each other, maybe just for formatting purposes. If we edit this form, maybe we put these next to each other because that's a cool way to do it. And we kind of want to have those flip-flopped though. Let's do that. No, I was supposed to be on the same line. Oh, it did. Okay, cool. All right. Well, in the meantime, while that happened, the processing completed, which is great. You always want to see this message here. So the process completed successfully. You'll notice that the button does become clickable again. And you have our finished merge file, as well as on the batch processing table, you see that we have a process completed message with the amount of documents processed, the start and end time, the run duration, and the batch processing name, which is just based off of this individual record. So now what we can do is we can go back in to our customers table, hit exit settings on all active customers now. We should see the new file attachment field, EFP document 2 and EFP date field 2. All of these now have a file attachment uploaded as well as the date time field updated as well. So that's the bulk document generation for Exact Forms Plus. I'm going to pause for a second because we're about halfway through and I just spoke a lot. Does anyone have any questions based off of what I just showed right there, which was kind of a quick and clean way to do Exact Forms Plus batch processing for bulk document generation? Jay, I see you came off mute. Do you have a question? That's right. I do see in the chat we had a question. Special character issues. Sean, yes, always special character issues when it comes to UTF-8 encoding. Just please make sure that if you turn UTF-8 encoding on, and this goes for everyone, and you ever see like a symbol. I don't know how I would make a diamond here with my hands, but if you ever see a diamond with a question mark in it, that is an invalid special character. They can be found all over your application. We do have tons of information on that. If you're having any issues with that and our add-ons, please let us know. It does mess up the XML API. So that is something to consider. So please keep that in mind. Jennifer, yes, thanks for raising your hand. Very considerate.
So what if I had multiple people that might potentially be running this at the same time? I mean, it might not be very likely, but it could be possible.
So are you
So
talking about collisions in running this?
yes,
Yeah, that's a good question. Pretty unlikely, but what you can do, and this is actually was going to be my next step and something that I wanted to show, because a lot of people kind of ask similar questions to that for different reasons. One of the things I wanted to show was the batch processing records. So a lot of people will make one batch processing record and they'll think that's all they could ever do. But if I were to add a new batch processing, essentially I'm adding a new batch processing record. So maybe I say active clients for, for Shally. So now what I can do is I could have a record identified just for an individual, and they can have their own batch processing kind of set up. Um, and the only problem with that is the batch processing arguments field itself. Now, for some folks, they'll just make edits to it and run theirs. But to your point, Jennifer, if you're having two people run at the same time, they can't edit what report they're trying to generate without causing a collision for someone else. So things you can do to make that happen is to make variable drop down fields is something that I recommend to a lot of my clients. That would essentially be something that would say, hey, what report do you want to generate? That would allow you to change the report. Another thing, and I chickened out on showing it, so Justin, shame on me because I talked to you about this before. But the query builder, a very little known tool that we have, that we have yet to really kind of put on show. You could have the query builder installed into the batch processing table as well, which will build you an MSQRY query that you can use each individual run. So I know I kind of bounced around with that answer, but essentially what you could do is have a different batch processing record for each individual on your team, depending on the team size, Jennifer. That might be a good way to do it. Does that make sense? Thumbs up. We like thumbs up. Um, you could either do that by the query builder, which would feed in a query, which would be dynamic and change for each run, or you can maybe make a separate batch processing arguments for each individual that would require you to copy the batch processing arguments field and make a new email notification. Or you can do just the drop downs like I was mentioning before, where you have multiple variable fields that would feed into this formula. So maybe you are able to say, I want to do, report for all inactive customers, and maybe that's report 8. So it's just going to change the MSQ ID from 7 to 8 for that individual. But good question about the collisions. Certainly something to keep in mind if you have a lot of users or people are using this frequently at the same time.